Hi guys, we are going to start chapter 5 today. We are not going to be doing every single thing from chapter 5 because we just kind of don't have time. So we're going to pick and choose the most important things that we think that you need to know, and it especially will help you prepare for 5th grade. Before we get started, I really need to make sure that you are sitting in a good spot. You should have a piece of paper and a pencil with you, and you should not be on any other websites, any other games, watching a movie. Nothing should be on. You should be sitting and listening. So as a reminder, you are in charge of your learning at this point. I'm not in front of you to tell you to pay attention, to move your seat. You need to make a good choice. You need to sit down and you need to listen so that you can understand and learn this information, okay? So I hope that we make good choices and that we are ready to learn. So this chapter 5 is going to be all about kind of different things we can do with a set of data, meaning numbers, and how we can analyze that data to find out some different things about it. And we're also going to be talking about something called probability in the maybe next week sometime, where we are going to talk about maybe the likelihood of something happening or not happening, depending on the data that you have. So before we get started today, we're going to focus on this word. It's called average. You've probably heard it before. I feel like we use it a lot in school, but we don't really at this point know how we find it or what it really means. So I'm going to give you a quick scenario. So let's pretend that our report cards are coming out soon for trimester 3. And so you get on your report card a letter grade, like an A, an A minus, a B minus, a B plus, whatever your grade is. And I think sometimes kids think that teachers just go and just like randomly do eeny, meeny, miny, mo and pick out like a letter for you, but there's actually like a formula, a way that we go about finding your grade, and it's all based on how you do and on your test scores. So what we do as teachers is we find your average, okay? So I'm going to give you an example. Let's say for math, you take 5 tests in the trimester, and we want to figure out what your math grade is. Let's say on chapter 1, you get an 88%. On chapter 2, you get a 97%, chapter 3, a 94, chapter 4, you get a 70, and chapter 5, you get a 92. So just by me looking at it as a teacher, I would be like, wow, they usually, this student usually does really well, but I do see that chapter 4 is a lower test grade, which maybe seems kind of out of the norm for you, and I'm not sure maybe why we scored that grade. Maybe it was a hard chapter, maybe we weren't really paying attention, maybe we didn't really study, whatever the case may be. If I want to find the average of your test scores, what I want to do is I want to find out give you a 1 grade. I want to take all of your grades and I want to find a number that basically describes how you are as a math student. So again, I don't just randomly figure out this number or randomly pick a test grade. I want to do a certain calculation. So what I would do is I would actually, as a teacher, I'm going to show you on my board, I'm going to write this down. I would take your grades. So say you had an 88 on chapter 1, okay, and you had a 97, you had a 94, I'm going to take away the sign, you had a 70, and you had a 92. What I want to do is I want to take all your scores, and I want to find a way so that I can find one number that kind of represents how you are. And what I want to do, if this is all of your grades, actually, say if I visually do it, say you got an 88, a 97, a 94, a 70, and a 92, just to visually show you. An 88, say I made this a bar graph. A 97 would be higher. A 94 would be there. And 70 would be the lowest. And then 92 would be like right there. Okay, so here's your bar graph. What I want to do when I find the average is, you see how these are all different? When I find the average, I want to take little pieces of this and I want to rearrange it so that way everyone has the same bar, so that all your test scores look the same. So what I would do, if this is test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I want to redo it so that way your tests all have the same, and that would be your average. It doesn't mean that if I got your average that that's what you got on each test. I just want to figure out about how well you do on each test. So what I would do is I would take all these numbers, my 88, my 97, my 94, my 70, my 92, and I would actually, because it seems kind of tricky, I'm going to put them all together, and I want to see how many total points you got. So what I would do is you can use a calculator for this, so if you want to pause and grab a calculator, you can. I'm going to add, if you want to practice your addition, you can. If you don't want to, you can just type it in. and I'm going to find the total. And I got 441 total points on your test. Now, that is not your average. No one gets a 441. What I would do then is all your points, I want to retake all of those on your little bar, like all your numbers, and I want to redistribute them, and I want to figure out about how well you do. So if I have 441 total points, I need to look and see how many tests did you actually take. You took 1, 2, 3, 4. You took 5 tests. So I'm going to take this 441, and I want to split it into 5 tests, and I want to see about how well you do. So I'm hoping we're thinking that if we're doing 441 and we're splitting it evenly, that we're dividing 441 divided by 5. Again, if you want to do this by hand, you can. If you want to use a calculator, that's fine as well. So I would do 441, and I'm going to divide that by 5, and I get 88.2. So I'm just going to keep it. I'm just going to round it. I'm going to say 88. That means that you got, on average, an 88% on your tests. Again, if we look at our actual test numbers back here, you only got an actual 88 on one of the tests. So does not mean that you got an 8 on every one. It just means that you about, if I took your scores like somewhere a little higher, somewhere a little lower, but you about on each test got an 88%. That's who you are in math. And then as a teacher, I would take that 88% and I would give you a letter grade. So an 88% is a B+. So that's how on your report card, if these were your scores, you would get a B+. So what we're going to do today is we're going to practice finding some averages and learning about what it means and how it helps us. So some vocabulary words you need to know is, again, I've been using that word average. There's another word you're going to hear which is called mean. Average and mean mean the same thing. So if I find the average of your test, or I can find the mean of your test, okay? So those two words kind of mean the same exact thing. So again, let's think about, when have we heard the words average before? I know that we hear it a lot in school where you find an average of your test grades, but we also hear it a lot, an example that I found that you guys would probably know more about is in sports. So we hear average all the time in sports when we hear points, how many points a player scores on average, or how many touchdowns on average they throw. And if you ever watch any sporting event, like a football game or a basketball game, the announcers are constantly talking about how much they average per game. So let's think about what this means. So I'm going to give you an example. I love the Sixers, and I love Joel Embiid. So we're going to look at Joel Embiid's stats. So somebody's job is to actually look at every player and all their different things that they do on the court and actually calculate all of their statistics and all of their numbers. So we can find out a lot about a player based on these statistics. So I'm looking at Joel Embiid, and I have some just like background information on him over here, but I'm going to focus over here on these 3 things. I see that they're all decimals. These are his averages. So if I look for this year, this NBA season, 2019 to 2020, this stands for points per game. Joel Embiid scores, on average, 23 points per game. That does not mean that he scores every game 23 points, okay? That just means that if I took all of his points that he scored and I tried to make them all even across every single game and redistributed all of his points, he would score 23 each game. So again, some games he scores way less, some games he scores way more, but as a player, he scores on a typical night on average in his normal playing about 23 games. Yes, he has some really great games where he scores more, and yes, he has some awful games where he scores less, but normally on an average night, he's about 23 points per game. So I'm going to show you how they came up with this number, because again, it wasn't just random. I went through, and he's only played this season 43 total games. He was hurt a few games, and the NBA had to stop playing because of everything that's going on. So usually there's 80 games in the season. He's played 43 games this season. And here are all the points. So in the first game, he scored 15. The second game, he scored 26. On the third game, 19, and so and so. And if we're looking, I know that his average 23, but I only see right here he scored 23 points. I don't see anywhere else that he scored actually 23 points. Because again, your average doesn't mean that you score that many every night. But if I look, I see a lot of his scores are pretty close, like 26, 27, 27, 23, 21, 23, 27, 26, 22, 24, 22, 21, 20, 24, 20, 24. A lot of his numbers are pretty close to that 23, which is how we got that average. But you'll also notice, like, one game he had 0 points. That was a really bad game. Nobody wants to talk about it, but he did not score any points. And one game he scored 49 points. That's his career high. That's a lot of points. That's way above his average. So that means that was a really amazing game for him. And on this game, he scored 0 points. That's really low, and that means he had a really bad game that game, okay? So again, most of his are around the 23 points per game. So here's my question is by the end, I want us to tell me how did he figure out this average that he scores about 23 points per game. So we're going to come back to this at the end to see how do we figure out that he scores about 23 points per game. What we're going to do right now is I want to show you what they would do right here. I'm going to give you another example that's a lot simpler than Joel Embiid's scoring. So it says Andrew has 4 shells, Beth has 9, Cynthia has 8, and it says if all the shells are shared equally among the children, how many shells would everybody get? So what I would do, nope, I don't want to. What I would do is I'm going to think of, I have my 3 people. So I have Andrew. Of course, this stops working. I have Andrew, and he scores 4 shells. I have Beth, she scores 9, or she doesn't score, she finds 9. I'm thinking of basketball, and Cynthia finds 8 shells. It says if all the shells are shared equally among the children, how many shells would we get? So I'm seeing that Andrew has the least amount and the other 2 have 9 or 8. So if I want to find the average, I want to find out basically about how many shells they each find. So what I would do first is I'm going to put all their shells together in a pile because I want, when I find the average, everyone to have the same amount. Average is everybody gets the same. So what I would do is I would put them all in a pile. So if I'm putting them in a pile, then I'm adding them. I'm going to do 4 plus 9 plus 8. And I'm going to see how many total shells they have. So again, I'm going to type into my calculator 4 plus 9 plus 8. And I get 21. So they have 21 total shells. That is not the average. That is how many shells that they have. Now if I want it so that everybody gets the same, because again, when I have average, I put it all together and I want everyone to get the same amount, I need to divide that because I'm sharing it equally. A lot of times we're like, well, how do I know what to divide by? Well, you just have to look at how many actual data sets or data points are there. There's 3 people, Andrew, Beth, and Cynthia. So that I'm going to divide it by 3 because they're sharing it among 3 people. So I would do 21 divided by 3, and then I would figure that out. I'm hoping that's a math fact, and we know that that's 7. So that means that the average or the mean is that everyone found about 7 shells. Again, nobody actually found 7 shells. It just means that on average, if they that day they found each of them found 7 shells. Obviously, somebody found less and somebody found more, but this is just their average. Okay, the average should fall somewhere in the middle of all of their scores or all of what they found. So we're going to practice. So how we find the average is we find the overall total, which I'm hoping we know means to add, and then we're dividing that because we want to share it equally by how many like different groups of things there are. So I want you guys to pause this and I want you to see if you can figure out the average number of stickers sold and then press play when you are ready. All right, so let's see. If I have here, it says 4 students sold stickers for a charity. The table shows the number of stickers each sold. So I have these 4 people, Abe, Bet, Carlo, and Diana. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, my whiteboard stopped working. I first see that Diana's had 28, she had the most, and Abe had 12, and they all have different amounts. I want to figure out the average or about how many everybody sold. So again, if I had like a bar graph, I would see Diana has the most and Abe has the least. I want to redistribute all the stickers so everybody gets the same. So in order to do that, I need them all to put all their stickers together because I want to see how many total stickers we have. So I would do 12 plus 20 plus 16 plus 28. And again, if I'm showing my work, even if I'm using a calculator, I still write down all of this. And I'm going to now add this together. So I had 12 plus 20 plus 16 plus 28, and I get 76 for their total. So they had a 76 total amount of stickers. Now I want to find their average. So I'm going to take that total, and now I want to re-split it back up so everybody gets the same thing. So again, a lot of us sometimes think, well, how do I know what to divide 76 by? Well, then you have to count how many total people are there or how many sets of data. There's Abe, Bet, Carlo, and Diana, so there's 4 people. So I'm going to divide that 4 ways. So again, I'm going to go back to, I wrote down my equation, I'm going to go back, but I'm going to divide this by 4, and I get 19. So that means that the average, or the mean, is that everybody found 19, or sold 19 stickers. Again, Abe sold less, Carlo and that are right around the average, but Diana had a little bit more and Abe had a little bit less. When we put them all together, everyone's sold at least or around 19. That would be our average amount of stickers sold. Okay, it fits in. It's not this crazy number that's too big or too small. It's kind of right in the middle of what everybody found. All right, now we're going to find the mean of some test scores. So we have Lila, Cody, Lila, Jody, Chris, and their scores on an English test. So I see that Lila got a 78, Jody got an 84, Chris had a 75. I want you to press pause, try to find their average on their test, and then press play when you're ready. All right, so if I were going to do this again, I want to find about kind of how much they scored because they have different numbers. So what I would do is I want to take all their scores. So I have Lila's 78, I have Jody's 84, and Chris's 75, and I want to find, well, all right, let's see how many total points they scored. So I'm going to add these together. Again, I'm going to write down my equation. So I have 78 plus 84 plus 75 equals, and that's 237 total points. That is not their average, that's just how much for total. Now I want to retake all those points, and I want to re-share them equally so everyone gets the same amount. So I'm going to take my total, and I'm going to divide that, and then I'm going to think, well, what am I dividing by? Well, there's 3 people who took a test, and there's three test scores, so I'm going to divide it by 3 because that's how much I'm sharing these points by. And I'm going to type it in my calculator. 237 divided by 3 equals 79. So that means that their average was 79. So that kind of makes sense just using common sense because they're right around that number. Jody's a little bit higher and Chris is a little lower, but Lila's right there. So right around, everyone's got about a 79 average. Okay, let's try 2 more. I want you to press pause, and I want you to press play when you are ready. Oops. And then we're going to go over this. All right, let's see. A farmer has 5 dogs whose weights are 28, 34, 56, 42, and 60 pounds. And I want to find the mean or the average. So again, these dogs are kind of all over the place. I want to find out like about how much the dogs weigh for this farmer. So I'm going to take their amounts, so 28, 34, 56, 42, and 60. And I'm going to add them together, and I want to see how much total they weigh. So I'm going to go over to my calculator. I'm going to do 28 plus 34 plus 56 plus 42 plus 60, and I got 220 total pounds. Now I want to see, obviously the dogs do not weigh an average of that. That makes no sense. 220 is way, way, way bigger than any of the numbers. So now I need to take that and redistribute it evenly among the dogs. So I'm going to take the total, and I'm going to divide that. Now I need to see, well, how many dogs are there? Well, I see there's 5, so I'm going to divide that by 5 dogs. And if I go back to my calculator, divide that by 5, I get 44. So that means the average dog weighs about 44 pounds on this farm, which makes sense because 44 is kind of like right in the middle of where the dogs are. Again, some are a little less, some are a little more, but they weigh about 44 pounds, the average dog on their farm. All right, let's do 2 more. So press pause and then press play when you are ready to solve this one. All right, this one says the table shows the distances Wayne jogged on 5 days. So we have Monday to Friday, and I want to know the average, how many kilometers did he jog? So again, he jogged different amounts each day, but I want to know kind of like on average he ran about how many kilometers a day. So I'm going to take these and I'm going to add each day. And I'm going to go to my calculator and I'm going to add them together. So he had 3 plus 2 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6. I got 20. So he ran a total of 20 kilometers that week. And if I want to know like about what's the average amount he runs a day, I would take that 20 and I need to divide that by how many days there are. Well, there's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So that's 5 days. And I know my math facts, 20 divided by 5 is 4. So the average or the mean is 4 kilometers a day. Again, some days he went a little more, some days he went a little less, but he does about 4 a day if that's what I was calculating. All right, last one. I want you to press pause and then try this problem and then press play when you are ready. All right, this one's trophies collected over 6 years. So how many trophies they've won. So if I want to find the average, you see the scores are all over. I'm going to first add up all the numbers. And then I'm going to see how many total trophies did they get. So I'm going to go to my calculator and I'm going to add it. So I have 15 plus 9 plus 12 plus 18 plus 20 plus 22. So they have a total of 96 trophies. And then I want to see, well, okay, about how many did they, what's the average amount that they earned a year? I would take that 96 and I need to split it evenly among how many groups? Well, I see there's 6 years, so there's 6 numbers, so I'm going to divide it by 6. And 96 divided by 6 is 16. So 16 is the average or the mean, meaning they earn around 16 trophies each year. Again, some years were way less, some were more, but in general, that's how many they earn. If we go back to Joel Embiid and just think for one last second about how we find the average of how did they get this 23.4 points per game, what they did is they found out the statisticians for the NBA looked at all of Joel Embiid's points and they added all of his points together and got a total of a lot of points. And then what they did is they saw, well, he played 43 games, so let's take all of his points and divide that by 43 games. And then what they got was he scores around 23 points per game. The reason we look at statistics and we look at averages is it can tell if you do around how you are performing. So again, if he is scoring around 23 points per game is his average, we can see how he does on a night. We can say like, all right, game 2, he did about how we expect. Game 4, he did about what we expect him to do. If he's near that 23 points per game, then he had like a normal night for Joel Embiid. He did a really great job. He scored points. He did awesome. But if we look and we're like, oh, he had 0 points on this game, and he only had 10 on this game, and he only had 3 on this game, we can be like, he had a below average night. But then you also, for statistics, have to look into it more. So I looked up his last game he played. He only scored 3 points, and I was like, that was not a good game for Joel. But then I looked, he only played 7 minutes that game. So that makes sense why he only scored 3 points, but it still does bring his average down. So if he had like a couple games where he had really great games and he scored 50 points and he scored 36 points and he scored 39 points and he scored 42 points and he scored 37 points, those games would bring his average up. That 23 would get bumped up a little bit because these scores were so good, it would bring his average up. If he has a couple bad games, then that would bring his average back down. So again, I can see like on this second to last game right here before the season ended that he scored 49 points. That was an amazing game. That's way above his average. That means he played stellar that day. So we're going to use some statistics to kind of try to analyze, are you around the average? Did you do better or worse than kind of the average of what was expected of you? All right, hopefully this was helpful. Go to Seesaw and see what you're supposed to do for the day. Bye, guys.